Good evening, everybody. A special meeting of the Board of the Budget Review Committee is going to be held this evening, Wednesday, October 19, 2022, at 7 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. Alderman at Large, Michael B. O'Brien Sr., yours truly, will be the acting chairman presiding. Let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance, and I would like to thank Alderman Como for stepping up and taking over the clerk's duties.
Absolutely. Alderman Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman Kelly. Alderman Jetty.
Here.
Alderman Karen.
Here.
Alderman O'Brien.
Present.
And Alderman Dowd.
Yes, I am on Zoom because I tested positive for COVID, and I certainly would prefer to be there in the chamber this evening, but I am here alone and look forward to the meeting tonight.
Mr. Chair, also in attendance, you have Mayor Donchis and Steve Bolton, Corporation Counsel, Alderman Govea, Alderman Klee, Alderman Camo, Alderman Tebow, Alderman Moran, Alderman Clemens.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm sure I speak for the rest of the Budget Committee. Hopefully, Alderman Dowd, you shake this pretty quickly and expect you back in the chamber shortly. Okay, since we have the roll call, I will now open up for public comment. Anybody in the audience would like to come forward, state your name and your address, and we'll time you 3 minutes on your public comment. Anybody wishing to do so? Seeing none, we'll move to communications.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
There is none.
Well, there's technically.
There is, sorry, it's listed on here twice, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage of R-22-063 relative to the reappropriation of fiscal year 2023 escrows.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor for final passage. All those in favor? Or is there any other open for any other? Fun?
Discussion?
Assessing?
Discussion.
Discussion, thank you. I'm getting a little ahead of the game, and I thank you. And I was reminded by Madam President, thank you so much. I think at this particular time, I think I would like to turn it over to the mayor, because I think you do have some definition of what is before us this evening. So excuse me, Mr. Mayor, but you get the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to take a minute to review where we are and give you some perspective on the issues that I know you're going to discuss tonight. So the city, the Board of Aldermen previously decided to allocate $4 million of the surplus to tax relief, which is similar to the amounts we have allocated in prior years. We were under some more significant financial pressure this year as a result of the fact that COVID has caused commercial properties has affected the value of commercial properties and has resulted in a greater amount of abatements than previously was typical. And as a result, more money had to be assigned into the so-called overlay account. So $4 million was allocated to for tax relief. And then what we're considering now is what to do with the money that was left over at the end of the fiscal year and was unspent. Now, what we're really saying is that the city, because of effective efficient management of operations, was able to save a number of millions of dollars from the budget that was passed by the Board of Aldermen for fiscal year 23, ending on June 30. And we made a proposal, and that is the resolution that you have before you, to reallocate the money to various purposes, which I will discuss in a minute. And there was a proposal made that those allocations, those reallocations of funds, should be reduced by the figure of about 2.1 million, and that money should be used for another purpose, tax relief. Now, of course, we all want to help the taxpayers as much as we can. But on the other hand, it is important that we spend money to make sure that we can deliver essential city services and that we not make short-sighted decisions which save a penny now and cost a pound next year or the year after. So the proposal was, and there's some detail to it, but I specifically wanted to spend most of the time talking about the idea that we would reduce the allocation to SURF by $1.5 million. We propose that $3 million go to SURF. Now, this sounds like an abstract, frivolous expense. Some people, is it SURF, S-U-R-F? No, it is not SURF, S-U-R-F. This is SURF, C-E-R-F, Capital Equipment Reserve Fund. What this is the money that we every year use to buy equipment for the city operations. Now, no money, zero, was budgeted for this purpose in the fiscal 23 budget that was just, or the fiscal 23 budget that was just passed. No money was allocated to capital equipment in that budget because it was anticipated that when we had money left at the end of the year as a result of frugal expenditures, efficient and effective city operations, that the money we would have left would be used in part to buy capital equipment. What do I mean by that? Police cars, plow trucks, garbage trucks, equipment we need at the landfill. Now, certainly, again, the idea of trying to improve the amount of money going to the taxpayers is certainly something we should consider seriously. But in the end, we need to decide what is most effective in the long term. So the 77% of city expenditures are for employees, salaries, benefits, pensions. But in order for our city employees to render effective city services, they need equipment. And this is especially true when it comes to the most basic city services that people rely on every day. Police protection, picking up the garbage every week on time, plowing the snow when we need to. So I wanted to go into some of the details and explain how this would affect this SURF. Again, not S-U-R-F, but SURF Capital Equipment Reserve Fund. And we have also other people who will speak in terms of the need for the equipment and some of the other proposals that have been made to reduce the allocations here. But also prepared to speak to you briefly are Karen Smith from the Police Department. I think she is still here. Lisa Foto from Public Works. Matt Sullivan, Director of Community Development. Tim Cummings from Economic Development. Dan Healy, who is of course, the city clerk, and Dan Donovan from the School Department. So let's begin. And John Griffin, of course, from the CFO is here to help answer any financial questions that you might have. So the first slide that we're looking at suggests that if we allocate $3 million into the equipment buying account, and if we buy and if we seek to buy what is scheduled to be purchased this in fiscal 24, next fiscal year, if we buy what's scheduled, we will end up being $1 million short, even if we do the $3 million. Now, we need to figure out a way to deal with that $1 million. And that's probably low. Why? Because the equipment prices that we have in the SURF schedule, the equipment buying schedule, are low because of inflation. Now, we've seen that. We just saw the police department come in both at the meeting of the Board of Aldermen last week as well as the Finance Committee meeting tonight. Their vehicles are up anywhere between 13% and 20% above the scheduled prices. So if that kind of escalation, that kind of inflation bears out, we will not be $1 million short. It will be more like $1.5 million short if we fully allocate the $3 million. And I would generally point out that in a period of inflation like we have now, the best approach to save money is to buy real goods now. Why? Because the cost of real goods, refrigerators, washers, plow trucks, garbage trucks, police cruisers, goes up year after year after year. And to the extent we delay purchases, we end up spending more money, not less. Now, that's not so true when inflation is 1 or 2%, but now what are we facing now? 8% a year. So we risk spending more money in the future. Slide number 2, which, thank you, Alderman Como. What that shows you is where we would be with the SURF account if we allocate only $1.5 million to the purchase of equipment. If we do that, we will be $2.6 million short of what is scheduled to be purchased next year. And we'll go on to look at how that might affect things. Slide number, and Mr. Griffin is here and can answer any questions regarding these projections. Slide number 3 shows you where the equipment purchases would take place, what is scheduled to be bought next year. And of course, all of the pieces of equipment are listed, but you will see that the main items are in the police department, about $900,000. Again, if the inflation rate that the police department has experienced recently holds, that $900,000 will be more like, $1.1 million. The street department, 2.5, almost 2.6 million. And you see what's listed there. Solid waste, that's a landfill. That is a regulated facility, subject to regulations by state DES, Department of Environmental Services. Park Rec, 767,000. School department, 408. Now, let's take a look. Now, the next slide just isolates the police department. And you can see that it's mostly police interceptors, meaning patrol cars and other equipment that they have planned to purchase. The patrol cars have a 2.5-year life, 100,000 miles. Ms. Smith just explained tonight that 2.5 years is all they can last. But some of this equipment goes back to 1995. One piece of equipment, another piece to 2001, 2004. I mean, this is not new stuff that they're trying to replace. And the next slide just gives you an example of what we're talking about. This is a police cruiser. This is the kind of thing that is bought out of the SURF account. This is how we deliver basic city services, like police protection. The next slide will show you, just isolates what is necessary, what is scheduled, the equipment that we would purchase in the street department. What do? They plow streets and pick up garbage, fix roads, potholes, paving, things like that. Things that people really rely on. Again, we're just going to give you an illustration of the kind of thing we're talking about. Next slide. This is a dump truck with a plow and wing. It plows 700 plus lane miles through 41 plow routes that divide it's actually 31 square miles of Nashua. In other words, There's a lot of use that goes into these pieces of equipment, and they need to be replaced when they're scheduled. Ms. Foto will tell you that when she came to the city, they were holding plows and garbage trucks together with baling wire and duct tape. And she and Mayor Lozo developed a plan to, and they could see having trouble delivering these services, plowing and picking up garbage on time. And they developed a plan to improve the equipment, and over the last number of years, that's been done. But the replacements need to be made as scheduled. Next slide just shows you a sidewalk tractor. That's one of the things that is going to be replaced and needs to be in order to plow around the schools and the other 50 miles of streets that we plow. A lot of use, a lot of wear and tear on this equipment. If anything, the complaints we get is that we're not plowing enough sidewalks. We do 50 miles out of 150. Constantly we get demands that should be expanded. Next slide shows you, a Packer, I believe. Maybe not. Maybe we missed that. But in these, in the street department list, of course, are the garbage trucks we're doing. Next, you see isolated just the Parks and Rec stuff. Included are lawnmowers and other equipment that is used to take care of city parks. And you can see what those items are. And finally, there are the school department purchases. Those are isolated. I would like to, again, repeat that the school department saved $2.5 million and asked that they be allowed, in other words, they operated $2.5 million less than their budget, and they asked to be allowed to spend some of that money on things that they needed, returning a full $1 million in cash to the taxpayers at the end of the year, net of the items that they thought they needed. And they could have spent that money if they wanted to, because they have complete autonomy once their bottom line is passed by the Board of Aldermen. So how could we possibly cut 2.95 and possibly $3 million from the scheduled equipment? Well, these are not alternatives that are, in my opinion, advisable, but this shows you the depth and the depth of the cuts you would need to make. If the equipment were to be purchased for the amount scheduled, which we know is never going to happen, those numbers are going to be low, so the actual deficit is higher. You could cut out all of the money for every single piece of equipment in the school department, in the street department. All the garbage trucks, all the plow trucks, everything. And you might make it if the price is held, which we know they're not going to do. Alternative two, again, just to show you the kind of thing you would need to do. You could cut entirely the police department, totally, all of their vehicles. That would get you $1 million, assuming their prices would hold, which we've seen that they don't. But that would get you $1 million at the 2.5, and then maybe 60% of the equipment from the street department. That could get you, were the prices to hold, $2.5 million. Or you could cut, and this is just alternative three. These are not things we recommend, but I'm just trying to show you the depth of this. How much $2.5 million would really do. You could cut everything from the landfill. Now that is a facility that is operated under the regulations of DES. We need to deliver every bit of service there, everything that is demanded. Equipment is required to do that. And cut everything there and 60% of everything that is needed in the street department. Now, again, I'm going to turn to some of our department heads to just give you a little more perspective. I mean, again, I sympathize with and understand the desire to return more money to the taxpayers. I mean, we try to do that every year, but the question is, can we continue to deliver basic city services that people expect and pay for if we don't have the equipment necessary to do so? Or if the equipment is so old that it starts breaking all of the time. Like Karen Smith just talked about, well, they tried to have this is at the Finance Committee, at 6. They tried to use the police cruisers beyond 100,000 miles, 2.5 years. But they found that when they did that, it cost more money, not less, because they were fixing the things, because they would break down, because it was not financially, there was no return on it, that it cost more to hold old vehicles than to buy new ones when replacement was scheduled. And that is true pretty much across the board. So I would like now, is Karen still here? Yes, okay, thank you. She's gonna just tell you a little bit about the way the proposal to reduce things would affect the police department. Lisa Photo can talk about Public Works, Matt Sullivan, Tim Cummings, and the others.
Thank you. First thing I want to mention about the table that I'm looking at for the police department. FY24 as listed is not the pricing that was supplied by our fleet maintenance. Basically, this table was prepared last fall for FY23. So you're looking at a table that has a 5% escalator based on a 1 year ago rates. As was mentioned, when we went to finance this evening, we have vehicles that were already being purchased with a Board of Aldermen approved capital equipment reserve funding has been increased. So looking at this, you're coming out of the gate with funding that is, as we're discussing, inadequate, because that FY24 table is based on a year-old projection that is given a estimated 5% projection of an escalator, which is great. In past years, the 5% worked. So I just wanted to make sure that it's understood that this is not a police department's FY24 cost estimate. It was a table that was working on a surf schedule for anticipated years. Well, now with inflation, this number, the 930,000, is not a working number. It has to, first of all, go back and get the baseline for the vehicles that we just purchased and add back in the 65,000 for the, I think 9 vehicles that we just purchased. And then we would probably have to be looking at what are the manufacturer's pricing going to be for the rest of these vehicles. And I would say that your other divisions are probably looking at wanting to do the same thing to find out what is the pricing going to be for their vendors in FY24. As far as these vehicles, yes, uniform patrol, the life cycle has been revisited. 2.5 years on our patrol vehicles is the life that we can't play with that number. We've done that, and it was excruciating having to go through. Don't ask us to do that again, please. I think we would lose our fleet maintenance manager. Basically, that's the information that I have regarding this schedule. I have a concern about the 930. It is early in the year. We can certainly take a look at it. If there's a couple of vehicles that don't need to be replaced, that helps a little bit, but that would be to offset some of the price increase, but I don't have working numbers at this time.
Now, Ms. Smith, while you're here, also, the chief I know couldn't make it because he's at a police convention, but There is also the idea that the department needs to add 2 officers. Are you able to address that?
Sure. So as of the end of September, we're down 12 officers. We are in the process of recruiting, and they are having some success. That's in the process, so I'm not going to be giving numbers. With the recruitment process, they have a new application, a new hiring app, and so that tool is advantageous for them to hopefully have even more improvements with the recruitment process. What I want to do is to be able to offer funding at the time when we have that point of full complement. If we don't have the budget funding and they have a candidate, to have to turn them away, to shut it down, is not where we want to be. We need to be able to go to the reserve at that time when we're fully at full complement and be able to continue the process. That's what we're looking for. If we don't make it, then the funding is returned.
Okay.
Okay, I do have, Ms. Smith, if you can hold fast for a second, I do have one brief housekeeping thing. Just noted that Alderman Como, thank you for your motion, but however, you're not a member of the committee.
tell you the same
So,
thing.
just to clean it up, I thank Alderman Karen for making the motion of final passage on R-22-063. So thank you, Alderman Karen. Okay, that just makes it nice and clean. I will open up for questions. Alderman Jettie, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Ms. Smith, the table that's on the screen, it talks about the FY '24 cost, and then it says the current cost in the last column, and those numbers are less than the FY '24. What does the current cost refer to?
Again, this table was created a year ago, and it was what we were supposed to need for SURF funding. So $43,219 is the first number there for that vehicle. So that would have been the cost of FY '23. FY '24 is a cost with a 5% escalator, and that's how the SURF schedule works.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Smith, you were just at the Finance Committee, and we were purchasing Ford Inceptors for about $45,348 to replace some of the equipment that you had talked about for the previous year. That alone is higher than what we're looking at the FY '24 cost, and now we're looking at probably adding another 10% or even higher to that. Is that what you're saying? So this column, FY '24, not only would we have to add a normal 10%, because that's kind of what things are increasing, but these numbers are below what we're purchasing right today. Is that
Correct. The baseline on this report is already low because that data is from last fall when we created the SURF schedule for FY '23, and then this FY '24 column receives a 5% escalator based on the very last column.
Okay.
And yes, correct, we went to the Board of Aldermen and asked for a SURF increase due to that 10% rule of the SURF schedule that requires us to go to the Board of Aldermen to receive an increase, approval from the Board of Aldermen, but that table has not been adjusted for that. So this table is short coming out of the gate related to inflation.
May I follow up?
Follow up.
So if I just took the current price that we just did of $45,348 for one of the for replacing one of the 2012 Ford Inceptors, or it might have been 2019, I'm not sure. That price was $45,348. Are you saying that you think next year this could be even higher, like 10% or higher than that? I mean, I know
Yeah.
you don't have a crystal ball, but I mean, is that kind of where you're going at?
All I can say is that that price needs to be increased by, again, the items we came to finance are the uniform patrol vehicles.
Right.
Those particular items need to be increased by the base that just happened.
Right.
The rest of them, need to be increased by a number that someone needs to determine how much should that be. And based on my purchase that I just did, a 15% might be a ballpark number. Again, I don't know. I can't tell you what all vehicles within the city are gonna go up in FY '24 because we're basing on '23 prices. This is not my game as far as, you know, we have an 8% right now cost of living or inflation. And the fact that the police vehicles went up an average, again, in that average of mine at 15 included a vehicle that had to be outfitted that was at 23. The other was 13. So we'd have to look at that. We really would have to look at it deeper. But yes, you're on the right ballpark that a 10% number could be a number that has to be increased.
Thank you so much.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on the committee, but I do have a question, and I'll ask it through the chair to Ms. Smith. So the 2 policemen that we're asking for to staff, would you, and I'm sure you know this, or maybe it was more of a Chief Rourke question, but is that the minimum we need, the maximum we need, or is it more somewhere in the middle? Like, with these 2, do we feel comfortable that we have staffed the police department properly to ensure the safety of the growing city? Because obviously, I mean, we're growing fast. Despite inflation, we're still, I mean, there's nowhere to live for people. So we're definitely growing and people are still building and all that.
I'll speak for the chief because I'm here, and you could certainly catch up with him another time for a greater in-depth conversation. What we want to do is at this time do the 1 to 2 because of affordability and because of the fact that we are slowly looking into doing this with meeting our full complement first, and the fact that we're looking at escrows. And I'm looking at, can we just look at a starting point, and then the following year look for 1 to 2 again, and make this a slower process. And then yes, according to our accreditation, it's a bigger number. But that would be a more in-depth conversation you'd want to have with the chief.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if we're going to do that every year where we look for 1 or 2 more, would we expect that would start being a budgetary ask and not an escrow ask, or going forward?
Absolutely, that would be a budgetary.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you very much. Ms. Smith, how long, if you can answer this, not sure if you can, how long have those 12 positions been open for the Nashua Police Department?
That number has been cycled. It was filled, I think, a year ago. We were at 0. So that number goes up and down. If it was only a year ago it was filled, I could look back, it was at 6, it was at 7, it creeps, and then it comes back down. So I hope that answered it for you. It hasn't been that long.
Okay,
The number's been creeping.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. And as soon as it gets filled, then you have another person leave. So
Sure.
will we meet that number? That's a gamble. But we want to be ready. And again, they have new approach. I've been with the police department for a long time. And at one point, they were, if I remember correctly, once a year, they had recruiting. They're doing it 3 times. They were doing it 3 times a year. Now they're doing it monthly. And this new application that they also have. So it's strategy and it's how they're doing it. So can they attain it? I don't know, but we want to be ready when they do. So.
The chair does have one quick question. You say with the positions that are vacant, I'm going to ask you to step in the swamp. You may choose not to. But what's happening with the state retirement system? It used to be the moniker, you know, the job is the job, but the bennies were pretty good. Now with the retirement system looking the way that it particular is, I don't see in fire, I can stipulate to that, but I'm sure in the police, you really haven't got a lot of people knocking on your door for these type of positions. And if I correctly remember, we put like a bird finder's fee in the past, trying to get, you know, enticement for people to sign on to the force. So we've done everything within our power trying to fill those particular positions. Can you enlighten us on some of that?
I don't have a lot to say on it. I do agree with you that the retirement system is not what it used to be, as far as benefits to the police officer. The group used to be outstanding, and taking that away has definitely hurt recruitment. But that's not an area that I'm wholly involved in. It is more the police that would, or the chief that would need to speak to how they're doing on that end.
Fairly answered, thank you. Any other questions to the police department?
Alderman O'Brien.
Alderman Clee.
Oh, I think Alderman Dowd has his hand up.
Alderman Dow, did you have one?
Yeah, just a couple things, since I'm the liaison to the police commissioners meeting. Smith, some of the vehicles that we're buying are also going to be hybrids, is that correct?
Correct.
So a savings there in the long term as far as fuel, and so that will a little bit offset the increase in price, but you have the initial procurement cost right now, which is higher. So that's one thing to look at when you're looking at the prices that we have going forward. The other thing is and years ago, we authorized, the Board of Aldermen anyway, authorized a much higher number of police officers. And I think when we had the chief in at the meeting, when we talked about it, we had numbers from Manchester and Lowell, which was significantly higher numbers of officers. And I think that with the number of officers we have, they do a fantastic job. But there are times when they just don't have enough officers, and the chief wants to get to a more comfortable position going forward to be able to support the city. And he pointed out to me that we're building all these apartment complexes, we're building the new big unit downtown. So he feels that he needs at least a couple of more officers to be in a better position to staff the required zones. So just wanted to point that out. And when I put my hand up, I asked, would you watch for it, Alderman Como?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Alderman Clay. And for the record, at 7:37, we were joined by Alderman Lopez. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may ask a couple of questions relative to staffing. Thank you to Ms. Smith. Recently, even before this had happened, I've spoken to a number of police officers on duty, as well as some that have left, and much to what Alderman O'Brien had mentioned, the retirement system seems to bubble up, and a lot of people go to Massachusetts for that particular reason. However, the question that I want to ask of you is, I know in the past we used to do hiring of those that graduated from the academy, and then we would have a 1-year kind of lag before they were trained and could go out on their own. I know in recent times we've kind of gone to, I hate, for lack of a better word, stealing from other municipalities, those with a little bit more experience, so we don't quite have, they still have somewhat of a lag. Are we still experiencing that, where people are coming in and it's 1 year before we can even put them out on the streets by themselves?
We do hire certified officers and different levels, and we have the first-year officers. That would be the two different ranks. Certified 1, Certified 2, and a first-year officer. And there does take 6 months before you put a regular first-year officer on the street.
Okay,
Yeah.
if I may.
Follow up.
Thank you so much. So knowing that, and I think one of the meetings that we had, there was a discussion that you were 13 down, but 7 were in the queue. So that would mean that we really are only 7 short, but those 7 in the queue are going to take this 6 months or however long to get them up to par. Is that correct?
Correct. Right now, we're looking at December, or a time frame that we will see those people come out of the queue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I may just make a comment and statement. I've recently been talking to, again, a number of officers relative to my ward, Ward 3, and the patrolling. No one misses a beat. You guys are doubling up on staff, and this is creating overtime use, if I'm not incorrect on that. So it's best to hire a person and not have to use as much overtime. In the end, it costs us less. Would you agree to that statement? Or correct me if I'm wrong, please.
I mean, there's a package there. You do have benefits that are involved, but right now, you can't get people to work overtime, so you have a problem.
That was kind of one of the things
Right.
that I'd heard. I
Right.
wasn't going to make that statement, but thank
Right.
you so much for your forthrightness. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one comment, and it came up in, I think, the Budget Committee last week, but because it's my ward, I just want to make it known out there. Charitable gaming is going to be coming to the Sheridan in the South End, which is currently my ward. So Chief Rourke was saying right now we have one police officer that's, really assigned to Ward 8 in that section of the South End. And so with charitable gaming, obviously, he's going to want to staff that up a little bit more. So with the whole thing with overtime and people not taking it, I think it's important that we do have another officer down there, and I think that's part of the staffing plan. So I just wanted to make that known to make sure that we've discussed that. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Well, Ms. Smith, you're off the hot seat. I would like to thank you for your time and diligence in appearing before us this evening. I will now turn to the mayor for his next group that he may wish to invite up.
With Public Works, Director Photo and company.
Ms. Photo, we do have chairs available for you.
Do we have enough for my team?
How many you got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Okay. There would be some odd man out. We only have 4 chairs.
Do you want to have a few?
We can try, and maybe when somebody's done within their particular jurisdiction, we can swap off.
Who's got the least seniority?
No, we're not gonna play that game.
I'm going to sit here. Why don't you go down the end? Musical chairs here a little bit. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Alderman. Hopefully I'm not going to lose my voice here this evening. I want to introduce some of my team that is here with me. To my left is Mike Rush, who is our fleet manager, our new fleet manager, so this is his first public meeting. Brian Conant, our Park and Rec superintendent, who I know you've all met. John Ibarra, our street superintendent, and over there, Jeff LaFleur, our solid waste superintendent, who I know you all know. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to Public Works escrows tonight. I began my career with the city about 13 years ago, and equipment, as the mayor mentioned, was literally being held together with duct tape and wire. He wasn't kidding. I was appalled. I couldn't believe it. I went to then Mayor Lozo and said, I'm afraid we're not going to be able to pick up trash in the near future. That's how bad a shape our equipment was in. She listened to my concerns, and we went ahead and did a fleet assessment, and the current surf plan is actually based on the fleet assessment that we did back in 2010. I think that came out. What the fleet assessment said was 70% of our solid waste fleet was in critical condition, 70%. Streets and Park and Rec were not far behind, with about 50% in critical condition. Essential services like trash pickup and plowing were being impacted. Trucks weren't safe to drive. Bad decisions were being made to fix equipment that was well beyond its useful life. So the majority of the surf items before you this evening are for your first responders in Public Works and Police, whose services are essential to the well-being and safety of Nashua residents. I suspect that the majority of calls that you get from your constituents are related to services provided by Public Works. 6 plow trucks and 3 trash trucks are included on the surf list in 2024. These vehicles take 2 years to receive from the date ordered, very long lead time. On the current schedule, the trucks will be 14 years old when replaced. These vehicles are already beyond the 7 to 10 year recommended life expectancy. Older equipment requires more repair and parts. Parts increase in cost each year, have very long lead times, and many parts become obsolete on older equipment. We're seeing a 30% increase in parts costs this year. The cost of equipment is also significantly increasing every year. The price of a plow truck in 2025 will be significantly greater than in 2024. Superintendent Ibarra will tell you he doesn't have enough plow trucks for all his routes. If we lose these critical pieces of equipment before replacement, it could impact our ability to keep streets clear during the winter. The trucks plow major arterials like Amherst, Broad, Main Streets, and DW Highway. The city would be crippled if these streets weren't plowed. The BOA set up a DPW snow removal trust fund about 24 years ago to assist with emergency snow removal costs in excess of what is budgeted. How could we contemplate not funding the very equipment we use to supply these services? Mayors Donchis, Lozo, and previous boards of aldermen have not wavered from funding SURF in the last 12 years because we didn't want to see history repeat itself. That's not to say we haven't deferred equipment, but we have never, to my knowledge, never completely not funded SURF. If SURF isn't funded, I would ask what would happen if we had catastrophic equipment failure? With serious supply chain issues and long lead times, what would our backup plan be? How would we fund this? I fully understand and respect keeping taxes affordable, but residents still pay taxes and will be expecting us to supply services. So thank you for listening, and we would entertain any questions you might have.
Yeah, I'll open it up for questions for committee members first. Any committee member has a question? Alderman Jettie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, the cost of a snow plow, a dump truck with a snow plow on it, it's over $300,000. It's a big investment. And, have you done an analysis? Would it make any sense, instead of having this expensive equipment, sitting there except when there's a snowstorm, would it make any sense to contract that out to private companies that have this equipment and could provide that service? Have you looked at that? Is that a possibility?
Our AFSCME union is screaming right now in the background. So we have a contract with unions, so we wouldn't be able to subcontract that out completely. We do try to subcontract out some of it when we need to. Very difficult to find companies to plow. In fact, Superintendent Ibarra will tell you that we've and now with the changes to the snow plan, we are relying less and less on contractors just because you can't find them. Even you'll see DOT advertising on the highways, and they can't find plow drivers either, or contractors. So it's a challenge.
If I may, I'd like to just add to that. Johnny Barra, Superintendent of Streets. That same equipment is used on all our infrastructure, maintaining the right of way for pedestrians and vehicles year round. Nothing is sitting. Maybe the grader from time to time, if we're not doing a reclamation of a ball field or grading a road. We don't have many gravel roads, but we do it. So this equipment is critical to maintaining our infrastructure year round. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes, I know that most of the phone calls I get are DPW related, not because they're doing a good job, but it's because there's so many things that happen that I'm sure all the aldermen get calls from people, whether it's, paving or potholes or just a number of things, stop signs, you name it. And I think that people expect us to maintain our services at a very high level. And I'll have to say DPW reacts to things instantaneously, and they do a very good job. But there's a lot of things that happen over the course of the year that put a strain on their ability to fix things. And I think, Director Photo, you would acknowledge that you're short-staffed right now. You've been trying to hire, And one of the places you're trying to hire are qualified drivers. And that's a problem across the state, maybe across New England, that it's very difficult to hire people that are qualified to drive these vehicles. So I think we're catching up, but you might just address that.
You're correct, Alderman Dowd. We have had challenges hiring employees, particularly mechanics. Drivers, we're down, I think 7 drivers right now. We're down operators. I think we're making some headway. We found, I think, a couple of drivers, but it's been a challenge. There's a lot of competition right now, and not a lot of applicants. So you've probably seen on our message boards that we've been advertising for our jobs.
I'm glad that you mentioned the drivers. Maybe the first 3 hours of a snowstorm is fun. After that, it's blood money, you know.
It's exactly what we call it.
Yeah,
Alderman O'Brien, blood
it's
money.
blood time, you know. I've done it myself, and it isn't pretty, you know. Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to add that the majority of the calls that I get are DPW related, whether it's a need for a stop sign or something of this nature. But one of the things that I get the moment a snowstorm happens is complaints that my street isn't plowed, or my street was plowed by a contractor and they didn't do as good a job as the city. How can I make sure that the city gets in here and does that? So kudos to your staff and so on, and I want to thank you for that. If I may also add that when I first became an alderman, Director Photo was kind enough to bring me to all of the little departments and so on, and one of the things that we talked about immensely was your drivers and them sleeping in the vehicles because they have to continue on the road and so on. Even back then, you were still having hard to be able to fill these positions. You said that you're down 7 drivers right now. What does that mean as far as your overtime, and how much longer does it take you to be able to do something such as this on that? And if these trucks aren't available, how much longer would it be?
So hopefully we'll fill many of those positions. I know that Superintendent's got several in the queue. I think that you'll be interviewing soon. We do have, I think, 1 or 2 drivers that we're bringing to the Board of Public Works next week. So that'll fill a couple of positions. But we fortunately have a large pool that we can pull from. Because we, you know, with all of our departments, we even pull from wastewater if we need to, and we can mandate others. Most everybody that's hired in Public Works has a CDLB, so we do have quite a few people that can plow, park and rec, also, and of course all of our trash truck drivers also plow. So we have a decent pool, but it will definitely be an impact if we can't fill most of those 7 positions. So.
One quick follow-up.
Follow-up?
I know in my ward, especially French Hill, Parks and Recs has to do some of the plowing because the streets are a little bit more narrow and so on. Are any of those vehicles also part of the SURF, or are we just looking at the larger plows? Or? No,
there is also Park and Rec equipment on the SURF schedule that would be in those areas.
And that's extremely important for my ward because of those narrow streets in order to be able to get in there, and Park and Rec does a fine job, so thank you.
I would, if it's okay with you, Ms. Photo, I would like to hear from Park and Rec. Park and Rec, as many know, is sort of the root of the fun in this city, particularly for our youth, whether it be youth soccer, baseball, pop on a football, if that still exists. It did in my time, but the different things. So with severe cuts that could be before us, I wonder if you can explain, you know, what would happen to some of the, could we not lime the pitch and groom the pitch and get it ready for the games and different events that could occur here? I mean, yeah, I imagine a lawnmower does multiple service in the different parks. So if it fails in one park, what happens?
Are you referring to the Park and Rec escrows or SURF right now?
Well, I see like in surf, you do have some things that are coming up. And so if those items were not replaced,
Sure, absolutely. The superintendent is standing there, so I'll let him speak.
That's a great point, Alderman O'Brien. It would have an extreme effect. We're talking about, we mow about 150 acres throughout the city. About 80 acres of that is athletic fields. And to get to those parks, those mowers, we have mowers that can drive down the road. That makes it more of an efficient process. And yeah, holding this back would be drastic. I mean, even one of the newer mowers we have, a 2017, is 5 years old. You know, they don't last that long. They get used heavily. You know, it's a great point. Yes, it would have a drastic effect and it would be negative, so.
yeah, and follow up if I may. I know that the city does have a good deferred maintenance program. But as far as Mr. Robert's trucks that go out and plow and everything, you're spreading salt. And we all know what salt does to a vehicle, and yet we're putting it in the back of a city truck. It's no wonder that the life expectancy is dramatically a wee bit shorter than perhaps a truck that was carrying loam all day.
Correct.
Is that detrimental?
Yes, absolutely. And as many of you know, we don't have a truck wash, so that impacts things too. We just have a wash bay at the street department, and that really is not sufficient, so yes.
Thank you. Well, it's something to consider as we look. Further questions by members of the committee or board? Alderman Karen.
Yes, thank you. So I was here back before any of you were here, and we didn't have surf. And we had a mayor that didn't buy equipment. So when the new mayor came in, they had to bond $10, $12 million just to get the equipment put together for park rec, streets, whatever. That's a detriment to the city. You know, the mechanics were working very diligently trying to keep things put together. So it's very difficult, as Ms. Foto said. You don't want to force the taxpayers to have so much burden, but you need to make sure that you're providing them with the services that they're paying for. And if we don't have the equipment to do that, then we're going nowhere. We're gonna go backwards instead of forwards. The account that we had was called the depreciation account. But I think one of the other things you need to explain to people, which I learned from being married to a mechanic, is that the year of the vehicle and the mile isn't as important as the hours that these vehicles put in. It's just like the fire trucks or the police cruisers because they're idling. So that adds to, you know, the longevity or the use of the vehicle. So you really have to understand all that, to say, well, why are you purchasing a vehicle that's 2015, you know? I would keep my car for, you know, for another 10 years, but it's the hours that vehicle is working. So I think we need to, you know, to recognize that, and whatever happens, happens, but I know Park Rec, the hours they spent with the mowers, because I see them going up and down the hill to go to the schools and the facilities over there. So we just have to really be cautious and really look at this in long terms, as the mayor said. Do you do it pay now, pay later? How are we going to balance this to make everybody feel that they've done the right thing for the city and for the employees that work within these departments? Thank you.
Alderman Cleave.
Thank you. I'd like to make a kind of an anecdotal comment. I remember a couple of years ago on Ward 3, a Thursday came and not everybody's trash got picked up because we had a breakdown of some sort of one of the trash vehicles. I remember getting those phone calls, my trash didn't get picked up, my trash getting picked up, and when I called to your office, I found out that, yeah, and it was gonna get picked up the next day. But I think it was actually supposed to be a Friday pickup, which meant the next day was a Saturday, which means you have to double up and we're paying more time. So the breakdown of equipment isn't just a breakdown of equipment, it's the inconvenience to the taxpayers, as well as the inconvenience to your staff having to double up on their route and doing nothing while that. So things kind of snowball, and to what Alderman Karen was saying, you know, it's pay me now or pay me later. And the taxpayers are not going to be happy if their trash is not picked up when they expect it. We expect it on Thursday unless there's a holiday, and we want it on Thursday. And I'm probably one of the most demanding people you have, so thank you.
Mr. LaFleur, would you like to?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, it's also a health and safety concern. Trash must be picked up.
Absolutely.
No option.
Jeff LaFleur, Superintendent Solid Waste. Going on with what you just said, I have 11 Packers right now. 6 of them are 10 years old. So we are looking at a point where we could be getting into having to repair them drastically. Almost all of my Packers have already been welded once on the sides because of the salt and the sand that's coming out. And to the point of not funding SURF, our division already tries to put off trucks as long as we can. We'll look at truck, we're not just willy-nilly saying, oh, the truck's up for up for replacement, let's do it. We always have meetings after meeting after meeting, trying to go over, trying to save every truck that we can and use them as long as we can. So if we're trying to do that and then we're thrown out that we're not gonna fund SURF, now it kind of throws our plan out of whack. We need to fund these things so we can continue doing our jobs.
Mr. Chair, could I add something quickly?
Absolutely, Mr.
Because-
Ben and Alderman Jettie, you'll be in the queue.
Because Alderwoman Karen reminded me of those days, and I recall when you're talking about that garbage routinely was picked up on Saturday with overtime, not just after holidays, just routinely. And it was in part, I believe, due to the fact that they let the equipment go so badly that, stuff was always broken. So overtime wages were incurred and other costs because the equipment kept breaking down. There were, some other contributing factors, but that was definitely there. And, I was not a public official then, but I observed this, and thank God we don't have to do that anymore.
Alderman Jettie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to give you the opportunity, I understand what you're saying about the garbage trucks and the snow plowing and all that essential equipment. But I want to give you the opportunity to defend your request for what I count to is close to $1 million for the Parks and Recreation Department, which, as opposed to those essential things you're talking about, so I didn't say this, somebody pointed out to me that it was, it's all fun and games. So is that something that we could do without, considering that, we're looking for ways to try to save some money for
Sure.
next year's tax rate?
So that's a fair question. You're talking about, Alderman Jettie, the public work, the Park and Rec escrows that are not in SURF, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to speak a little bit on it, and then I'll turn it over to the superintendent. So there are many pieces of equipment in the Park and Rec department that don't meet the threshold of SURF, okay? And so they're smaller pieces, and there was supposed to be what was going to be called a SURF 2 that should be funded. That never happened. So we are in a very critical spot with some of the smaller equipment, which Superintendent Conant can speak to after. There's about $232,000 of equipment that will make it near impossible to continue their operation without. Much of that equipment dates back 30 years. It's that old. So that is definitely critical. There are a number of when the other Park and Rec escrows are really to consolidate things, but there are some critical things. There's a pool that needs repair. There's a stone house roof, which is failing. We need to figure out what to do about that. So that's for architectural study of that. Our playground improvements, we have about $14,000 for playground, I think, maintenance. That's just crazy. We had a bridge at Roby Park, which is part of the playground, and it broke, and it cost $8,000 to fix. That's something that's critical, that has to be fixed. It was not safe for the kids to play on, so that's more than half of the maintenance budget. So some of this is for playground equipment. Our fields are very much overplayed, and we need other equipment and maintenance on those fields to make them in better condition. They haven't been maintained quite up to what the superintendent thinks they should. So some of it is for our fields. We also have citywide infrastructure improvements. That is through the street department. That's really important. That's $100,000 that we use for sidewalk repair and other things. Our mill and fill program, small paving projects, things like that. So that's critical as things come up, as you all ask for things, whether that's signage or that comes out of that extra money as things come up that we weren't anticipating. We also have bridge rehabilitation. We do not have a bridge maintenance program. That's really, really important. That helps us to take a deeper dive into some of our bridges and maintain them better. I think there's some other things. The irrigation at Main Dunstable, that's critical to be able to help maintain that field. And I think there are some other small things. I'll turn it over to the superintendent to see if he has anything to add. But much of this is just really critical to us being able to maintain our fields and our playgrounds.
Thank you, Director. Brian Conant, Superintendent of Parks and Rec. Alderman Jettie, I think your question is based towards the equipment. You stated $1 million. I think with SURF and the escrow, that's what that would add up to. The $235,000 that's for escrowed money, to the director's point, is to replace a lot of equipment that we can't on SURF. In order to get on SURF, it has to be $50,000 or more. We have a lot of small ticket item equipment that doesn't meet that threshold. Now, a lot of the equipment on this list is, I'm not reinventing the wheel, it's things that we already have. I could run through the individual pieces of equipment if you'd like. 3 pieces off the top of my head are from the 1980s. At a certain point, due to age, this equipment becomes mechanically obsolete. And you know, it to a certain point, it plays into morale too. You know, people want good things to work with. To provide a good service, you need a good piece of machine to work with. And, you know, that's why we're at today. In the current budget, we've got $14,000 for miscellaneous playground improvements. You know, to the director's point, we just replaced the bridge at Roby Park. It was $8,000. Miscellaneous equipment is $14,000 as well. A small stand-on riding lawnmower is $12,000. You know, I've got 5 of them, 6 of them in the department. It's what I've got in and the operating budget is inadequate. So I think that's why we're asking for these funds. Does it solve all our problems? No, it doesn't. Is it a healthy start? Is it a good beginning? Yes, it is. Is it the direction we need to take? Yes, it is. So I hope that answers your question.
Another example is the superintendent came to me today. We have problems with the poles at Sergeant's Ave.
Yes.
That need to be replaced. They're in danger of falling. So where does that money come from? You know, so things like that come up that need to be replaced for the safety of our residents, and that can come from these escrows.
All right, several. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You probably know, I coach still, so I use some of the fields.
I do.
And there's, there's no doubt that some of the fields are in rough shape. You know, so, I mean, it stinks that I go to other towns or other, especially Massachusetts, and the fields are beautiful. And, you know, I think about Ledge Street, and there's, you know, we don't have any water supply there, so we can water the field because it gets too dry, or there's a hole out in the outfield that if the kids don't know it's there, they, you know, could twist their leg or their ankle on it. And Alderman Como could probably back some of this up too, because he's been on the fields as well. And, you know, to try to get these all up to par and the way we want them, and I assume that both Cal Ripken and Little League probably have equipment in there that you guys were funding out of the city, like tractors and things like that, that at some point we would have to replace too. It would be on here. Is there programs like grants or, you know, I was in, not that this is gonna happen, but I was in Billerica playing or watching my daughter, I think, play softball. And their field was donated by Tom Glavine, who, you know, pitched for the Braves. So do we have anybody in New Hampshire that would want to, you know, fund us here in Nashua? But do we have grant programs or anything that can help us with Parks and Recs type fixes, like playgrounds? You know, I think of Mines Falls, the bridge was gone so it was replaced, but now the cross country from either the middle schools or the high schools can't use it.
Right.
So they've lost that track now. Now they're going to other places. This weekend we were in Hudson over at PMA. But, I mean, it's a temporary bridge, right? But it's probably going to be there for a while because it's probably not on any list here to get fixed or to get replaced with a brand new one. So I understand how Parks and Rec and DPW in general just can have so much. There's just so much to fix or to keep maintained. But I assume we do look at grants and stuff, but I was just curious if that's something we look at.
We definitely do. I'm not aware of any. Park and Rec grants are hard to come by, but yes, we certainly do. We're always looking for, and we work with Administrative Services Director Tim Cummings now also to look for various funding, and he's always bringing things to our attention that he comes, but unfortunately, there's not a lot for Park and Rec.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clay.
Thank you again. I want to add another comment to something that Director Photo had said. She made a comment about her budget, and we, in this horseshoe, have often come to her for signage or for this and that. And while I'm sure they do budget for some extent, today is a perfect example that I went to her and said that, and you've all heard me speak of the issues that we have at the Shattuck Street Tot Lot. And at this point, the police and everybody are saying the only resolution are cameras. So now I come to her and say, we need cameras because we have to maintain the safety of the equipment as well as the people within it. We had an incident where there was foul language and very disgusting pictures that were put on that, and they immediately went and cleaned it up. But the police can't catch these individuals without something of that nature. So we have to protect our parks, and sometimes it's something as simple as a camera. And while you may say, oh, that doesn't cost a lot, but then there's going to be cloud use, and there's going to be all kinds of other things that go with it, and multi-departments and so on. They can't think of everything, so to ask them to have to come up with funds from somewhere else and nitpick, I think it's unfair. And I think Director Photo does a phenomenal job with her budget and trying to meet our needs, and I really do need those cameras, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A clarifying question to you. I know we're talking about surf right now, but can we ask questions about the other items that Park and Recs have asked for?
I will allow it, but may I remind the committee members, this is one of 2 meetings. And so I really haven't got the crystal ball myself that was mentioned earlier in here. So I don't know how long things are going to go, but, you know, I will allow some latitude there. But please keep in mind that this could be protracted to a long meeting, particularly the second part too, so.
And by the second meeting, you're talking about the full board?
Yes, a full board. Yes, we're going into a full board of aldermen. And I state that also to remind the public, stay tuned to the same bat channel because we're going to be coming live with that. So, yes.
Great, but So then, may I?
You may.
So thank you all for coming. So I just had 3 questions about 3 items on the escrow request. Essentially, if you can answer why now, what's going to happen, and is it at imminent risk of needing repair or something dangerous is going to happen? So one would be to fund the cost of resurfacing Lions Park, adding hopscotch and 4 shuffleboard courts for $11,000. To fund the cost of citywide ball field improvements. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Ice rink roof replacement. And then the Shady Lane pickleball courts to fund the cost of citywide playground, as part of the playground improvements.
On so the ice rink roof replacement is actually repurposed to citywide ball field repairs. So that isn't something that's currently on SURF. That's going to be repurposed.
Are we voting on that at the next meeting, though?
No, this is, we're voting on, with this discussion tonight is on the SURF account.
Okay.
So some of these are being repurposed. It is a little bit confusing, because it was for ice.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah, well, excuse me, I misunderstood. We are talking about all the escrows, but
Okay.
Yes.
right now, most of the discussion
This
is
is on
around the
SURF.
SURF, right?
Yes, okay.
So the original budgeted purpose was the ice rink roof replacement, and it's being we're asking for it to be repurposed for citywide ball field repairs.
I see.
Yeah, so that is a bit confusing.
I got it. All right, and the same thing, may I? Mr. So we're going to repurpose $11,000 for resurfacing Lions Park. We'll repurpose the ice rink replacement for the citywide ball field improvements, and then another $8,840 for playground improvements.
That's correct. So that was the money that was left over from the Shady Lane pickleball improvements
see.
that we made. So we're just repurposing that $8,000 for citywide playground repairs.
And if I would have gone up and saw original budgeted purpose, I probably would have saved some time here a second ago.
No problem.
So I guess, then I guess my only question is, why do we need to resurface those courts at Lions Park and add hopscotch and 4 shuffleboard courts for $11,000 now? I'm saying I'm not against shuffleboard courts and hopscotch, but why is it
And
gonna
I
happen?
will let the superintendent
I'd like to
answer
speak to that.
question.
Brian Conan, Superintendent of Parks and Rec. If we were to go over there and look at that court, Alderman, it's severely cracked, okay? The surface isn't uneven yet, but if we're not proactive in our approach on this, it's gonna get worse. There's currently right now 1 shuffleball court and 2 hopscotch lanes, whatever you want to call them, okay, on the court. They're extremely faded. The court doesn't have a basketball court. It's not really heavily used. I was approached by about 8 gentlemen early in the spring when I got here, saying how they love to play shuffleball court over there. It is the only shuffleball court we have in the city of Nashua, 1. I thought after listening to them that it would be a good idea. The court definitely needs to be, needs some preventative maintenance to make sure those cracks don't become even worse. That's what that money's going towards. It's really towards filling in the cracks and resurfacing it. And I felt that after listening to those gentlemen that it was a need from the neighborhood that surrounds that park and a want to have those shuffleball courts in there.
Just a comment.
Follow up?
Thank you. So that's the kind of answer that I'm looking for, so I can go back and explain to constituents why we're spending on what.
That's why we're here tonight, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have Alderman Lopez and Alderman Clemmons in the queue.
I had received constituent questions as well about the shuffleboard, or shuffleball, and I had to explain to them as like bowling. It's not literally shuffleboard like the garden. But I had people who were under the belief that this was going to be an $11,000 painting project, and that's pretty sweet paint, but it's really a resurfacing project.
That would
and
be.
you put the hopscotch on it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, and I appreciate the questions, or the question from my colleague, but I think what it proves to me and what it shows me in my experience that I've had here on the Board of Aldermen, in the privilege to sit here on and off since 2008, is that we have a very well-run city. And it's run by folks who care not only about the community, but about the taxes that are being spent by the community. And I think that all of these requests that are in front of us are worthy projects. And my thought on this this evening is that, you know, for me, it's, we can put it off, and we can put it off, and we can put it off, and then we're gonna spend a lot more money down the road. This is money, escrow money is money that we've already collected and taken from taxpayers. We've already gone into their wallets, we have the money, it's in the bank. So yes, we could give it back to them somehow by cutting some of these things. But to me, I don't see that as prudent. Because what that will mean is that we will have to go back to them in the future and ask even more from them. So I want to just thank you all for being here tonight and for answering our questions and for getting this all out on the table.
Okay, thank you. We do have one more question. Alderman Como.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. More of a comment, really. I just wanted to speak really quickly to the Parks and Rec part of it. And like Alderman Tebow, I have many years in baseball in the city. And one of the things that I've noticed that always breaks my heart a little bit is how Parks kind of gets the last bite at the apple. And I can remember years and years and years, you know, we've asked for holes to be filled in and things like that. And it was always the money got spent on something else. And hearing that, you know, we had some projects that looked like we had some savings, and so we're gonna repurpose that money to do these ball field improvements. In my mind, that it's just years overdue. And so I'm glad that we were able to efficiently run some other projects to end up with this extra money that we'll be able to repurpose towards the parks. When we talk about things like, you know, downtown and the performing arts and outdoor dining, where we always talk about making Nashua a place that people want to come to and raise a family in. And, you know, I know most of us have children. I want to live in a city with nice playgrounds and nice ball fields and things like that. So I think that's just as important as all of, you know, the other projects that we talk about when we talk about making Nashua a nice place. I want to make sure that Parks and Rec never gets kind of forgotten behind some of the bigger, flashier departments. Thank you.
Okay, and for the record, a little housekeeping. We welcome Alderman Timmons at 8:20 this evening. Welcome, Alderman. Any further questions to BPW? Seeing none, Director Photo.
Thank you very much.
This committee would like to thank you and your team for coming in and clarifying many of the issues before us this evening. So again, thanks. Mr. Mayor, I'll refer it back to you next on your agenda that you would like to step forward.
Now, I realize the hour, so we've got some, I'd say the next people are very brief, but at least they should tell you what they're thinking. Matt Sullivan can address at least one of these items.
Welcome, Mr. Sullivan. I'll give you the introduction.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, committee, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to use my time this evening to address just one of the escrow requests that I spoke to at the prior meeting that I believe requires some clarification and some justification. And specifically what I'm referring to is the proposed or requested $200,000 allocation into the hydroelectric trust fund. And I wanted to just provide a few data points for you to consider when holding your deliberations this evening. And of course, answer any questions related to that escrow and the other escrow requests I put forward. I did want to clarify that the current balance of the fund, understanding that there are several outstanding invoices for work performed in the month of September due to some stop logs that were actually damaged, is actually about $125,000. And to give you a sense of what that number means, Since the fund's initial use in 2015, the average expenditure from the fund has been $145,000 per year, but it's ranged from $11,000 in one fiscal year all the way up to $365,000 in one fiscal year. And the reason for that, obviously, is because the nature of the fund is intended to cover emergencies as they arise at one of our two, or any of our two hydroelectric facilities. And so it's that lack of predictability to the fund's usage that makes it very challenging to request funding, whether through the budget process or, of course, through the escrow process itself. But what I can say with confidence is that it is important to have a healthy and readily accessible fund balance in the event that something does happen. And as I explained at the last meeting, that's particularly critical with our facilities that are generating revenue. Downtime at our hydroelectric facilities is doubly impactful when we have an incident. Not only are we paying for repair that has to be done, but we're also losing revenue that's critical to making them a solvent part of our energy portfolio. And so I just want everyone to keep that in mind, that even in the event that emergency funding is made available through some other mechanism, every moment of downtime is critical to those facilities. I also wanted to just quickly mention that we are headed into some unprecedented territory with the Jackson facility in particular. We're scheduled to have a turbine replacement at that facility in the coming 12 months, hopefully. But it does also mean that there's end-of-life concerns for the equipment within that facility. And so we're entering uncharted territory when it comes to whether or not that equipment will be reliable over the next 12 months. Hence the increased need to have readily available fund balance in the event that something does happen. We want to make sure that we are able to achieve some revenue, particularly because that facility will be out of order during construction. And so in closing to my comments, I do just want to mention that I'm not sure what this committee and the board will ultimately do when it comes to all of the community development escrows. I'm speaking only for myself, but I am very sensitive to the fact that some funding does need to be put into that trust fund, in my opinion. Of course, I have a bias here in presenting that idea. But I believe that we are putting ourselves in a somewhat precarious position based on the timing and the life of the end-of-life issues that I've identified. I do think that based on the average expenditures from that fund over the last 8 years, we are looking at a possibility of $145,000, but it may be much more than that. So I want to put us in a position that we can be prepared for anything that might happen. I'll close my comments with that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the other 3 escrows that I have before you for consideration. But I just wanted to address that specifically based on the comments I made at the last meeting.
Mr. Sullivan, if I may, I do remember, and I think some of the longest serving aldermen do remember, we did have something catastrophic happen to one of the dams, to which one of the turbines needed to be replaced. And because of the age of the dam, and it was a very old turbine, you just don't buy these items off the shelf. They have to be engineered and it has to be constructed and fit within the proper orifice or design within the dam and everything else. And if you look at it, you only have a very short window to generate really good funds with the dam, like you say, in the spring, and they're basically weather related. So if something fails in the spring, you're losing all potential source of revenue here. And the city does collect, I think, could you go over the wattages that we do have that I kind of worked on that bill too and got that passed. Let me pat myself in the back.
I'd be happy to quickly cover that. So the Jackson facility is a 1 megawatt facility, whereas the Mine Falls facility is a 3 megawatt facility. We're not currently net metering. I mentioned this at the last meeting, but there is substantial revenue generation. And to Alderman O'Brien's point, the spring season is particularly tricky because rainfall and snow melt are important things. And so if we do have downtime during the spring season, it can be incredibly impactful. And as I reported at the last meeting, the hydroelectric facilities do run in the black. We are generating revenue for the city despite some of these longer term expenses that we've taken on and these contributions that have happened over the past to the hydroelectric fund. But critical to ensuring that continues into the future is having the spring season to collect revenue. And hence my hesitation about not having funds available should something happen to get a contractor in quickly to correct the issue.
And if I may add, this is a rare gem in my research in trying to push the bill through up at the legislature. We're the only municipality that has this type of format with a dam that I'm aware of. There isn't that many in New Hampshire, if there is, somebody else. Revenue, getting revenue back into the municipality. So this is, quite beneficial. Further questions by members of the board? Off the hook.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, thank you for appearing before the board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, referred to you.
All right, why don't we, again, keeping in mind time, I hope, Tim Cummings has just got a couple things he wanted to mention, I think. Now, we don't need the slides at this point.
Okay.
I think we're largely beyond them.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if we get rid of the slides, that means we're going to have to look at Alderman Dowd, but.
Well.
No, he is a friend, so I.
I'll take Dowd.
We can look at ourselves.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, through you to the committee. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development, Interim Administrative Services Director. I'm here before you to speak a little bit about the escrows this evening, and I'll keep my comments brief as I know the hour is late. I think first and foremost what this body needs to understand is maybe some of the consequences if you were to look at some of my escrows that I have asked for, and if you were to make any changes. The ones that come to mind, and some of my escrows are relatively small, but they do have some big consequences to them. There's a utility vehicle being escrowed. Now that utility vehicle is to replace the current utility vehicle that went out last year 5 times for service. That utility vehicle is what is used to clear the sidewalks on Main Street. So just want you to be aware of the fact that if you weren't to fund this escrow, we continue to use the existing utility vehicle. The consequence of that decision will be we won't be able to clear the Main Street sidewalks as quickly as we would like. That's one of the paramount ones that I wanted to bring to your attention. I have other ones as well. The other one that's in the back of my mind is the Elm Street Middle School. The Elm Street Middle School study is for $50,000 to continue the outreach to develop a plan that will hopefully turn that asset back to the private sector, which would generate taxes for you. But nonetheless, if nothing does occur on it, that asset returns back to the city's coffers in June or July of 2024. And there will be an operational cost that everyone needs to be aware of, approximately $150,000 that we will need to put into our operational budget. So this escrow is more of a cost avoidance strategy. We really want to try to move away from having to add that $150,000 into the operational budget. That is something that I am stressed about because I can already see us potentially needing to carry it for 1 year based on how I see the current conversation trending. Relative to the administrative assistant line item, that escrow that's in here, all I can say to that is I think over the months we have heard from certain individuals that additional administrative support is necessary for my office. I heard those comments loud and clear. This is my effort to try to do something about that. Just Friday alone, I got 4 right-to-know requests that are going to take hours to fill. Hours of my time to fill. Happy to do that. That is our responsibility. I can tell you I do need the support. I recognize that. And this is just my way to try to bring that to your attention and try to address the issues at hand. With that being said, I'll leave my comments there. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Alderman Moran?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Cummings. For the part-time admin, it seems like a low cost for an assistant to help prevent technical violations that might arise from, a lawsuit from here to there. That could actually save us quite a bit of money. Would you agree with that? That it's a low cost to prevent future losses to the city?
I would. I would also say I'm trying to do it as fiscally responsible as possible. It's part-time, non-benefited, and the idea would be it be temporary in nature. So we can actually evaluate whether we actually want to make it an operational type of assessment and try to add it to the operational budget. So that was why the strategy that we took was decided upon at that low dollar figure.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez and Alderman Clegg.
With regards to the utility vehicle mentioned, as pleased as I am that it cleans Main Street as well as it does, because there are, like, the Mary Sweeney home and a number of residences there, an increasing number every day, as a matter of fact. It also cleans the rail trail, if I am correct?
It absolutely does.
Which is an
Alderman
extremely
Lopez.
important artery for children going to and from school, people living in the neighborhoods who would otherwise have to be walking in and out of West Hollis or Central Street. I would consider that a pretty important safety consideration as well. That same utility vehicle being out means that suddenly somebody on a scooter can get about 2 blocks and then realize that they're stuck.
That's correct, Alderman Lopez.
Excuse me, Alderman Clegg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have 2 questions. I'm going to start first with your part-time administrative position. Is this the same position that you, in an effort to reduce the city hall budget, that you removed from your department? Would this be the same position as that one was?
It wouldn't be the same position per se, because we have Amy DeRoche, who backfilled and took on a lot of the job responsibilities, but not everything. And Amy DeRoche already had a full-time job. So we had to reduce the amount of service we provided out of the Office of Economic Development. With the loss of the 1 FTE, this would bring us back to being able to provide 0.5 of that.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate that. I know how taxed Ms. DeRoche is. She gets a lot of my phone calls too. And if I may, a second.
Follow up.
To the utility vehicle that you mentioned and that Alderman Lopez brought up, I know we had an ice storm and so on, and it was good to have that vehicle there trying to do its best. It was very difficult, but I can't imagine not having that there, especially on Main Street, and as was pointed out, the rail trail. The loss of that would be devastating when we've only got one. So I appreciate you putting that in here. Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. When I was prepping my amendment, I noticed that the city had 31 open heads. What prevents you or other directors to look at resources to reallocate those personnel to say, we may want to reallocate some dollars from these departments to fill a head in my department, to go to staff it that way?
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may.
So that's really a better question asked to the Chief Financial Officer of the city, but as I understand it, we are constrained between transferring between lines. So it's not as though, like, as an individual department, we could take from one budget and move it to another budget without actually going before the Board of Aldermen for approval. So the constraint actually would be the process to do that. It takes a lot of time.
Got it. Thank you.
And at this time, the chair would like to ask CFO Griffin, if he'd be so kind, if you want to step up and your opinion to the question. You may have a seat or you may stand there if you wish.
I can stand. I've been sitting all day, but thank you. John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. That is a very good question, and Director Cummings has answered most of it. But I would like to say we have a good team here in the city. So, for example, if Mr. Cummings needs some assistance from my folks, we provide it. I think what he's looking at here is to get back to where he was. But some of the things that shackle us is when you folks approve a budget for a division and you want to transfer that person to another division, you need aldermanic approval. And you want to do it for the long term. But the mayor and his team always look at when we have vacancies, when we have folks that are leaving, we look, do we really need the person? And how do we need the person? So it's an ongoing, effective management tool. I've heard, vacancies, as we heard the police department and other places, it's really hurting us. So what we need to put in place is a recruitment, retention, and job growth plan. And I know Mr. Cummings is committed to that type of thinking, but it actually is, it's funny because some of us would learn that if there's no transition, everybody's happy. That's certainly not the case now with the workforce team that we have now and the pandemic coming from that. So it's a great question. It provides the necessary funding for some of these things that we desperately need that have been advocated tonight. With regard to the police, and Ms. Smith did an excellent job, police department is funding their operations of overtime with their 12 individuals that are not here. I'm not sure you knew that. And what the chief and others have determined is, starting, as Ms. Smith said, incrementally, we need the 2 people to get eventually where we're gonna end up. There was an individual at the, one of the public hearings, great question. Brought the chief up, wasn't this chief, it was another chief, he says, I got a great idea for you. I think you could hire another 50 policemen and you won't have any overtime. And the chief at that time took very respectfully, discussed it and said, that's a real good question, but you can't afford it. There's a reason for overtime. The reason for overtime is you can't really afford the 50 extra officers with full benefits and pensions. So and they do a great job with that, and you've heard about it tonight. And what they're asking is just the next 2 people getting towards maybe a bigger complement to satisfy the city and maintain that second in the country, safest city in the country. So probably a long-winded answer, but we work together. We'll continue to work together. And we've all heard, DPW, police, fire, there's not a lot of people banging our doors to work in this particular city, and we need to actively recruit and position ourselves to be a destination. And you get it through excellent services, parks, things for people to do and go. It'd be great if we could relocate a lot of folks into the city and enjoy all the things we have. So it's a great question, an interesting one, but we deal with it all the time. We've had vacancies throughout my tenure here. And we know they're gonna exist. We don't necessarily run out and replace. We have to have a sustainability and a transition plan for the city. So that's why all of this is here, and you're doing a great job weighing the evidence and the needs of the city. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. Kind of just going a little bit of a different direction. Director Cummings, last night at the Planning and Economic Development Committee, you mentioned the escrow for the restaurant, the outdoor dining expansion on Main Street. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair. And I apologize, I should have referenced that in my opening comments. So there's an escrow setting aside for the expanded outdoor dining, which there's a current plan in place for 3 years of narrowing of Main Street. There's $70-ish thousand being set aside year over year. We pick up and put down the barriers. We need a funding source for that. There was consensus last night to file legislation for somewhere around $500, give or take, per parking space per season. That will generate somewhere around 20-ish, 25 at the most, $1,000. It will cover half of the cost annually to put down and pick up those barriers. And I understand there's an idea that maybe we should try to cover the cost with the assessment of that fee, and I welcome that thought process, and I think you could cover, again, partial cost, not all of it. But the one thing I would want to stress to you this evening is that best practice is I would make sure you have that money sitting aside, because we go to a third party and we contract, and that third party contractor is going to need to know that there's money available to be paid, and that what I would suggest we do is we look to reimburse ourselves once we collect the money, we won't be able to enter a contract unless we have an identified source of funds.
Follow up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you, Director Cummings, for that explanation. So, so basically, this money that's in here, let me ask you this. Do we have anything set aside right now for next year for putting out the barriers?
Bear with me, I'm just thinking about that. I would think that we have approximately $30,000. Yeah, approximately $30,000, I think, right now off the top of my head, that would be available if you for next year, not the entire amount, if you will, but we don't have the following month. What I'm trying to do in my head, the math in my head right now very quickly, is we just had the barriers picked up, and I don't know the exact cost of that, but on average, it runs between $20,000 and $25,000.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so basically what this money here, if we look at it, right, this is my opinion, but if we look at this money here is we know, based on the discussion last night, that if we continue this program, we're gonna have these costs that are gonna be an annual cost to us. And part of the discussion last evening was, you know, that we're likely not gonna make up the entire cost to put out the barriers and for the program based on the fees that we charge, but we could make up some of it. And so the idea behind this escrow, why I am in support of this escrow in particular, is because it provides the basis for us to be able to put out the barriers next year, and then hopefully we'll get some of that back. We'll recoup some of that back with whatever fees we have. So this is basically just to make sure that the first part of next year happens, and then from there, we'll have some fees. We'll have to figure out, obviously, in the future, how we make up the difference from what we collect and what we don't. But basically, if we don't have money out there for next year, we'll need to identify a different source later on with how to put those barriers out. So, so I am definitely in support of that. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Clay?
Thank you, once again, Mr. Chairman. Director Cummings, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I remembered, and this is kind of adding to what Alderman Clemens had commented. You made a comment, I think, last evening that one of the key things was that we had to think forward as far as like the barriers and so on, that in order to be able to get a contractor for it, we had to kind of show that on the books, we have the money to pay for it, and we're just not kind of spitballing it, hoping that we're going to get money. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we needed to have this, or we won't get a contract from anybody. You said something to that effect yesterday, did you not?
That's correct. You need a bona fide source of funds to be able to enter into a contract. And a contractor is not going to work with us with the idea that maybe someday they'll get paid.
Understandable.
So again, what I would recommend is you set this money aside, have it available, understanding you're going to be charging some money. I don't want to misrepresent anything that we would pay for the entirety of the exercise, but I do think you would be able to, you know, pay yourself back, if you will, with the collection of the fees, at least a substantial portion of the money.
If I may, Mr. Chairman? Yes. Thank you, and I won't belabor this too much, but way back when I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs, one Thanksgiving, we always had a Thanksgiving dinner, a turkey dinner for our veterans. And the problem that we had was we didn't pay our bills. We didn't put the money aside for whatever the reason was. It was a great faux pas. And at the last minute, we had all these people who were saying, sorry, no turkeys for your veterans. There was panic amongst us as employees and so on. they did get the funding, we did get to DC and so on, so I don't want to see something like that happen at the last minute. We can't get the barriers down or picked up. So I appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
Director Cummings, if last year it was free and this year it's 500 a space, do you anticipate any kind of attrition among the participating restaurants? And if so, would that adjust the cost, or is the contract like, nah, this is what you charge for to put them everywhere where you need them?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first and foremost, no decisions were made about the $500. I think that could change. I think there was general consensus that legislation would be forthcoming, and you'll ultimately make that decision. I can tell you between now and when that legislation comes before the committee, I'm going to go back out to the community, talk to the restaurants, get a better feeling for whether there's that level of participation. My initial due diligence on that front is I think this is very acceptable. I see a lot of participation occurring. I will reaffirm that sentiments at the committee in the next few weeks.
Alderman Como.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to sidetrack us into a downtown dining conversation, but
Please don't.
I'd just like to point out that I heard at least twice so far tonight that the proposed idea wouldn't fully cover the cost. And I'd just like to, point out that we're choosing to do that. We could choose to make it enough to fully cover the cost if we wanted to. So the idea that whatever we come up with won't fully fund the program is entirely of our own doing. So that's all.
May I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
So that conversation actually occurred at length last night at the PDC meeting, and I would encourage you all to listen to that conversation, because there is that open question that needs to be addressed. And what I would recommend to you is whatever decision you make that decision based on a framework of research and due diligence and what you believe is justifiable from the marketplace. And so the market is telling us that it seems relatively acceptable to pay somewhere in the vicinity of $500. Could it be more? Yes. Could it be less? Yes. But you're in that range of acceptability, especially if you're looking for participation. If you want, and I think that's the ultimate goal. So I would strive for whatever decision you make for it to be factually based.
Alderman Clemens.
Well, one quick thing, and you can charge, right, if you have a 700 or 1,000 seat theater, you can charge $100 a ticket. But if nobody wants to go see the show, if you charge $75, and you can fill the seats, and that's sort of, anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions to Director Cummings? Seeing none, Director Cummings from the committee, thank you very much for appearing. Mr. Mayor, do you have any other witnesses?
Yes. We have Dan Healy. Why don't I just say that the money is designed to, there's money designated for city clerk. Money is designed to enable them to use temporary help to scan all of the voters who vote in November 2022. That's required by the state. It's a huge process. It'll probably be 25,000 voters. They think they need it all, but they might not. But they need something. If they don't use it, they will, just return it to us. But that's what that's for. Rather than have them come up and say that, I thought I'd just cut the time a little bit. Thank you, Dan, for waiting. But we also have Dan Donovan from the school department, who's been waiting. He's got issues on the surf list.
Did you have a question,
equipment.
Alderman Clemens?
I did have a question through you to the mayor on that scanning thing, and my question is if we don't fund that, what happens then? What are the consequences?
Well, maybe Dan would need to answer that, but there's a 90-day deadline by which all the scanning has to occur. And if it weren't done, I suppose we'd be in trouble with the state of New Hampshire.
So I'll just say for the primary election, my staff and I have been taking it home to do the scanning, just to get it all done. So, I mean, we would find a way to do it, but you're also then ended up paying them overtime because they're doing it, most of it after hours. Because we try, I know our line sometimes gets long at City Hall, but we're trying to focus on still the stuff that we need to get done, the marriage licenses, the certificates, birth certificates and things like that, dog licensing, and the election stuff. So currently, we're taking things home. They're getting overtime for that, just to make sure that we meet certain deadlines. The September primary has to be closed out before the general election. So we're closing the checklist on the 26th. So everything has to be done by then. We probably only have an hour or two left at this point. So that will be done within the next few days, but it's very time consuming to scan a whole checklist. I did 2 of the wards, and then once you scan it to reconcile the numbers, it can take, a whole day to do 1 ward. But it does end up getting done, but it's easier with more people doing it, and then not having my staff take things home a few days a week.
And it really, this is the state system of election security, really. I mean, they're tracking every vote. They're, and there's a lot of manual people labor that goes into doing that.
Thank you.
Alderman Moran.
Just a clarifying question, is there a, thank you, Mr. Chairman, by the way, is there a security issue with taking stuff home? There's no data from voters that could
No,
be
so the checklist that they take home is a public checklist. So you could come in, if you wanted to look at that list, you could come to my office and view the public checklist.
Thank you. Just a follow-up comment. Thank you, because people watching at home in this, how this country is going with voter integrity, could be down here egging your car when they hear stuff like that. So
No,
I
it's
appreciate the
public
clarification.
Further questions of Mr. Haley or the mayor? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Haley.
Thank you.
Don't go far, you're going to be with us in part 2 of the meeting. Okay, Mr. Donovan, have a seat, please. And could you introduce yourself, sir? Mr. Mayor, do you want to give an introduction as well, too, or?
Not much. I mean, I just reiterate that we look to the school department to run an efficient operation to the extent they can and to save as much money as possible. And this year they did save $2.5 million from the budgeted amount. They have budget authority. They could just spend the money, but they have the character to return the money to us and then ask for permission to use some of it. So Mr. Donovan is seeking to use some of the money for equipment for school department needs. But he can give you the details.
Yes, Dan Donovan, Chief Operating Officer for the school district. Just to run through the SURF relatively quickly, we only have 4 items. We certainly don't have the number of vehicles that police and streets and parks, et cetera, have. But we do have, just like they've run into, inflation is an issue. So we have 4 items. The 2 expensive items is a sidewalk plow and a John Deere tractor, and then a 1-ton pickup. We use those for our fields. We have the high school fields, middle school fields. We also have 18 buildings. And we do work with the city each year on a plowing plan. They help plow some of the schools, we plow some of the schools. So that's discussed typically probably around this time each year. So we have some of the equipment and they have some. Our vehicles are typically smaller than theirs. We have only 2 of the large plows. And the other vehicle we have is If these costs go up, I spoke with Mr. Smith, our plant operations director. What we do is we defer the truant officer vehicle to another year and purchase these 3 items. And I did go over last time when I was here last week, the other escrows that we brought up, so I don't know if anyone has any question on any of those. Feel free.
Alderman Lopez.
So, Mr. Donovan, I hope you got my email earlier today. Regarding the Franklin Street playground proposal, rather than reiterating my questions, what would that look like if it were approved as part of the escrows? How would that be enacted? What would it look like? And then how would it affect the school's operations, people using it, all that?
Okay, the Franklin Street School, the students will be moving back in right after Thanksgiving. They're currently working on the playground. This escrow is, we have the playground equipment, we're putting it in now. Our staff is working on that, our plant operations group. This escrow is to put a rubberized surface down for the, around all the playground equipment, especially since a number of these students have special needs. So that's what that is. That surface won't be put down until after winter. We just recently put one down. We also have the Panther preschool at the South High School. They had a surface that lasted about 12 to 15 years. It started breaking apart, so they put a new one in. We did that in the fall, and speaking with the people that put it down, the providers, you don't want to put it down in the winter because it won't harden correctly. So that surface will be put down probably April.
Follow-up?
Yep, just to clarify then, this probably won't include any new construction equipment or anything. It is a rubberized surface, so it doesn't need to be put in before all of the equipment is, but it will, and so it can be put in the spring when it's being used, and it's not going to interrupt any of your operations.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Donovan? Seeing none, Mr. Donovan, thank you from the committee for your time and appearing before us and answering our questions. Okay, I think we did it all, right, Mr. Mayor? We got everybody?
Yeah, unless people have questions for me or anything.
Okay, I'll open
But
it
I'll
up.
be here for the budget committee and the board, so.
Yeah. Any questions of the mayor or anybody in particular from the budget committee? Seeing none. Okay, let's look at what we've done so far. We heard of many of the different pros and cons of looking at R-22-063, which is relative to the reappropriation of fiscal year 2023 escrows. The motion before us is by Alderman Karen to recommend final passage. I will, yes, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to amend R-22-063. I'm going to speak slow for the clerk.
Thank you.
By reducing the unlike requests from $6,349,016 down by $1.5 million. And that will be funded from the SURF fund. And I'd like to speak to it, please.
Yeah, you may speak to your motion.
Thank you.
And did you get that copied?
What is the line number?
Yeah, could you repeat slowly?
Yep.
So you're reducing line.
I would like to
item
reduce line number 8.
8 for the SURF?
Yes. SURF
the
funding
amount
from
of-
3 million to 1.5 million.
So it would be reducing it by 1.5 million.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All set.
Thank you. We heard tonight from a lot of the directors advocating for fiscal year 2024, which is several months from now, not fiscal year 2023, which there is money in the SURF fund to pay for everything that they need. When we were going through the budget process, nothing was put into SURF, perhaps in advance of unforeseen escrows that were anticipated from those that run the budgets. It was interesting to hear how vital all of this equipment was for future years, not the current year that we're in, but future years. Yet no money was budgeted in this current fiscal year to pay for that. I did a quick budget math right here in my notebook that said even if we put $500,000 into SURF, that would be 0.16% of the total budget. And I just think for here, we heard from directors advocating for what they need. I'm advocating for the Nashua taxpayer because they didn't get to speak tonight. And I feel that that's my role. And that's why I'm putting this amendment before this committee to support. Thank you.
Okay. At this particular time, Alderman Cummings, I'm going to hold off. I would like to call CFO Griffin. Do you have any opinion what it would do to lower it to that amount, please? So that the board can make a rational decision on the pros and cons.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. John Griffin, Chief Financial Officer, Treasurer, Tax Collector. As I've mentioned, and as the mayor mentioned on several occasions, the proper funding of SURF has been a struggle. And then it's not a struggle that just happened. It's been a struggle for several years. So what I explained either in the Budget Review Committee or the last Board of Aldermen meeting, we're in a situation where we've got, and as Alderman Clemens mentioned, all of these funds have already been taxed. We're trying to do the best thing we can with them. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, to defend the $3 million, I mentioned $1.7 million plus 3, 4.7, minus the 2.2, well, we're already past the 2.3, but that sets us up for fiscal '24. And I also mentioned at that time we had a roughly $5.5 million budget to pay for in fiscal '24. So what's coming behind that, the mayor and I have done some deep dives on this analysis, but we're going to need, we should have been, I know some of you folks have been here, we should have put $3.5 million into SURF every year to make sure, as Alderman Jetty said, we had cash. We would also need to put, great question, I did some homework, for the next 10 years we're going to have $9 million worth of apparatus and $9 million worth of refuse equipment. So if you divide that by 10, you need another $2 million a year. So you really need $5.5 million to pay cash for everything. So you're trying to cut the escrow, so you're basically freeing up another $1.5 million. It was interesting, and I kind of anticipated your question, that why are we planning for '24 when we're in '23? It's because of the strategies that we've used over the last several years to make sure we fund. And as I mentioned to you, you don't have to worry. If you put $3 million in, as the mayor said, we're chasing $1 million. If you heard from the team of DPW folks, police and others, they're going to take the critical look at not only the cost of things on that sheet, but whether they need them. And we all work together, and I wanted to give them credit for that over the last 4 years. So the question we all have to ask is, what are we doing for '24 when we know we have $5.7 million worth of expenses? That seem to be pretty important. Sometimes we're accused of not planning. I've heard that. I've heard SURF is messed up and all that, which it's not. You heard tonight. Working with the mayor, we felt strongly that we should put $3 million in, which is what we put in last year. Last year we put $3 million in, we knew we had $900,000, so we knew we were going to have that surplus to position ourselves for $3 million this year to put to set the stage for a more easily view of fiscal 2024. I recommend we do what we proposed. Had a lot of discussion with the mayor and other team members. Very sensitive to the tax rate. I basically calculate the tax rate with the team and send it up to the DRA for approval. Not sure what you do with $1.5 million. I know Corporation Counsel Bolton told Alderman Jetty that 1.5, you just cut it's gonna go to unassigned fund balance. The next motion you may make is let's put it against the tax rate. So it's 1.5 divided by 2.5 times 18.3, $18.30 tax. That's what you're kind of saving. But I'm also thinking that the challenges next year are no different than they are this year. The problem we have this year, and the mayor said it time and time again, is you've got a burden shifting from commercial to residential, and you've got the in-truck class issues of some people's properties going up more than others. So, but it's painful to deal with that. It's good to see that the values have gone up. As the mayor indicated, we're in a section of the entire country, Nashua and Manchester section, that's gone up, and we're in the top 25 of price increases. So I'm looking out for the fiscal 24 and beyond. So what I'm saying is we need we put $3 million in last year, put $3 million in this year, gonna have to do the same thing next year. The reason why we don't budget it is a great question. SURF has been treated a little bit interestingly. Like if we need operating costs, the Board of Aldermen might say, you know something, we'll figure something out, but let's get the $500,000 of police and fire. We did that a couple of years ago. Just like it seemed to, you know, and that's why we presented what we did tonight. It seems like an inanimate object. So it's just the timing of the funding. Alderman Dowd has suggested we have more of a comprehensive look at SURF. It can't be done tonight, but as I'm mentioning, we got a 10-year horizon where we need like 35 million. We got 18 million of bonded items. I mean, those are big numbers and they're necessary. What we tried to show tonight is you need all this stuff. Can you make like a couple, like you do at your home, right? Can you not do something or do something else or whatever? And we constantly look at that. But I'm not sure how much value that 1.5 is going to give as I tell you that it's 1.5 divided by 2.5 and back off the 1830. That's kind of where I'm at. But I'm happy to take any additional questions. Thank you.
About 11 cents.
Okay, yes, Alderman Clemens and Alderman Dowd.
Thank you. So I'm not on the budget committee, but should this pass forward to the full Board of Aldermen, this amendment, I will not support it. And I would highly recommend that the folks on the budget committee not support it either. And I had previously stated in the last Board of Aldermen meeting that it would be something that I would support. But that's before we had this. And so while I understand that if we make $1.5 million cut, all of the things in SURF for this fiscal year will be okay, it's the next fiscal year that I'm worried about. And the reason I'm worried about that is because I don't know if we're going to have as big of a surplus next year when the escrows come out. I don't know how big of a tax burden people are going to have next year. Are we going to have to put more money back towards the tax next year? So we could do it this year, right? But what this is telling me is that, so in other words, we could put more money back. We could put that $1.5 million back towards the taxpayers this year. But what this is telling me then is that we're going to have to put $2.6 million into SURF next year just to cover the budgeted items in here. And I think we can all agree that it was made a very good case tonight for all the things that are in there. And so if we don't do that, if we take if we do this year and we give people back the money, then next year we have to figure out where are we getting $2.6 million just to fund, and that's before inflation. So maybe it's $3 million. And where does it come from? So we have the money in hand now, and we should do this. We should fund SURF now while we have the money. Because, like I said, with the escrows, it's money we have already taken from taxpayers. Yes, it would be nice to give them back some, and we are. We're giving them back, what, $4 million, I believe. And that, you know, is going to help the tax burden, and that's a good thing. But we also have to look into the future. And, you know, it was said, well, I represent the taxpayers. Well, I represent the taxpayers too. And I've been elected by the taxpayers since 2007. Sometimes they vote for me, sometimes they don't. If they don't like me, they can vote me out. But I do represent them. And I feel that, you know, looking at these things, you have to look into the future. We don't have crystal balls, but we have to do the best that we can. I do say that we have probably, when you look at the lists that we're on, where we're the best run city, you know, by Wallet Hub, where, you know, year after year, we have a AAA bond rating. We have, you know, one of the best places to live. That man over there is responsible for a lot of that. And he's telling us we should put the $3 million into the account. And if he's telling us that, then we should definitely do it. Because, like I said, this is one of the best run cities in the country. And there's a reason for that. So, my advice, you listen to our expert who knows what he's doing, and that's going to benefit the taxpayer in the long run.
Alderman Dow.
Yes, I've been dealing with SURF for at least 22 years, and probably more if you go back. But, and I've had concerns about the SURF doesn't operate the way the name implies. And we could work on that downstream. But we are many millions of dollars short to support SURF. And, you know, the $3 million, we could have put $3 million into SURF from the 23 budget. But that certainly wouldn't help the tax rate next year. We didn't put $3 million in the 23 budget this year because we anticipated having $3 million in monies left over. So, you know, everything in SURF is need-based. There's no fools in there. You know, if you want to go out and take a look at each individual piece of equipment and see what it costs to maintain it and replace it, be my guest. But I can tell you that we've had to do a lot of things with SURF over the years just to keep it solid. And cutting it by that amount of money is just going to make a bigger problem later. So it may be, you know, feel good today and then don't feel very good tomorrow. So I will not support this, either here or in the full Board of Aldermen meeting. And I advise the members of the Budget Committee also to not approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Clegg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to start with that I think everybody that comes to this meeting here in the Horseshoe does such because they do represent the taxpayers and they want to do the best by them. A while back when we spoke, I think at one point someone talked about $2.5 million trying to be cut and give back to the taxpayers. And I got a text message from 3 different people who said to me, do you realize that on $400,000, that means a $72 savings? So if I have a $400,000 property, I save $72 within the whole year. What are we gonna lose in the city for that? I was shocked to actually see 3 different people did that. So I did a quick calculation, 1.5 means about $43 for the year. And that $43 per taxpayer, while $43 to me is very significant, it can pay a bill of some sort and so on. But what it would mean is all of those things that we talked about don't get funded. So $43 from each of the taxpayers is a lot easier to deal with than next year, when not only do we have to ask them for more than the $43, we have to ask them for additional funds because next year is going to be extremely volatile. We don't know what this inflation rate is going to be. We don't know what any of these things are going to happen, and we don't know if we're going to have any extra escrows as we have in the past. Since I've been on the board, I've seen us short the SURF account time after time, and we always look to the escrows. I don't think we can do that next year. I don't think we can actually short it and say, well, let's keep our fingers crossed that we have escrows. I've also known that we've often given the the $4 million back to the taxpayers from the escrows. And we don't do too much more than that because without getting too technical, what it will do in the long run is it's something that's going to become unsustainable. Also looking at budgets. We never look at a budget of just this particular year. We have to look at budgets of next year. That's why people do 5-year plans for businesses and 10-year plans for businesses. We have to think ahead. If we only look at this year, we're doing our taxpayers even more damage in the long run because we're not anticipating. I don't like the fact that we've kind of played with the SURF fund, and I don't mean that we're underfunding it. I don't mean that way. I get a little anxiety when we always say, well, let's see what we're going to get from this account, from the escrows and so on. But I defer to those who've had much more experience. I don't think any of us are going to really be able to understand what's going to happen in the next years. And I don't think there's any fat in the SURF. And I don't think any department came asking for more money than they need. And personally, I want my trash to be picked up. I want my streets to be plowed. I want all of those things, and I know my constituents did too. If I said to them, it's going to cost you $43 more this year in taxes so that we can have that plow done, and that I think the majority of them, there are going to be some that are going to say no, because $43 may mean whether or not they can pay their taxes this year. But we do so many things. I know we're talking about increasing the senior rate and so on, and every time we take away from it, we're going to add the burden to those that are going to pay for it. So I don't want to hurt the taxpayers. I'm not on this committee. I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote or make recommendations or anything. I can tell you is that I don't feel comfortable even taking $1.5 million. And I think my colleague to the left is doing this with goodness in heart and truly are thinking about it. But I think so are the rest of us that don't go that way, because I think we're thinking more of the future, and I appreciate everybody's opinion. So thank you.
Alderman Jettie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my points were expressed already, and I just want to, share with the committee that as much as I appreciate Alderman Sullivan's, desire to lower the tax rate, and I was, with him on that, but, I appreciate our having this meeting tonight so that we could ask questions of the department heads, and hearing the presentation, I just can't, I'm not able to, and I don't want to micromanage, these people who are experts in their fields. But hearing what they had to say about, certainly SURF, I feel that SURF has been underfunded, and I could see trying to, I'm not willing to take money out of SURF. I think I think if anything, we should be adding money to SURF, especially hearing the presentation tonight. You know, it's like you have a, you know, in your home, you know, this is for my constituents out there, you know, in your home budget, you know, most of you probably have money set aside for, you know, a rainy day, you know, the roof fails and you need a new roof. So every year you put some money aside, you set some money aside for the time when you know you're gonna have to replace that roof. You know, if 1 year comes along and you want to, you know, choose to do something else with that money and you don't set it aside, when the time comes to replace the roof, you're not going to have the money to replace the roof. So, you know, I feel that SURF is very important and that we should continue to fund it. And when I look at the, you know, so where else can we save money for the taxpayers? When I look at these escrow requests and hearing the explanations that were made, you know, I'm at a loss to come up with any significant savings. And, you know, just to repeat and put in perspective, you know, reducing this by 1.5, and if we choose to, you know, to pay down the tax rate with that 1.5, you know, it's only going to mean reducing the tax rate by, I think, 11 cents. So it's just not significant enough to take money away that, you know, we're going to have to come up with eventually. So, you know, I cannot, I'm sorry, but I can't support the amendment. Thank you.
Further, Alderman Sullivan.
I'd like to move the question.
Okay, is that a motion to move the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the motion before us is to move the question, non-debatable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
You have to do a roll call.
Yes, we got to do it by roll call, and thank you, Alderman Clemmons, for reminding me. Could the clerk be so kind?
Yes, sir. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderman Karen.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
No.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
You have 5 yeas and 1 nay to move the question.
Okay, motion carries. The question before us is the amendment to R-22-063, which basically stipulates, and correct me, Alderman Sullivan, if I'm wrong, or the clerk, have you got it?
I do.
Line 8 of...
The motion from Alderman Sullivan is to reduce line item 8, SURF account, in the amount of $1,500,000.
Okay, everybody's got that? Okay, since we do have Alderman Dowd, I will call for a roll call vote. Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Dowd?
No.
Alderman O'Brien?
No.
Alderman Karen?
No.
Alderman Jettie?
No.
Alderman Sullivan?
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire?
No.
You have 1 yea and 5 nays.
Okay, motion fails. Okay, this brings us back to our original motion of original bill of R-22-063 relative to reappropriation of fiscal year 2023. We do have a pending motion by Alderman Karen to recommend final passage. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I will call for the roll, and it will be by roll call. Will the clerk, when you're caught up?
I'm good. Alderman Dowd?
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes.
Alderman Karen?
Yes.
Alderman Jettie?
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan?
No.
Alderman Wilshire?
Yes.
You have 5 yeas and 1 nay, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Which moves us to, I'm going to declare that R-22-063 has been approved, passes. Nobody's brought it to any attention or new business. We do have a thing that is O2219, tabled shall remain on the table. General discussion. Keep in mind, we are going to go after this into a full board meeting. So if you do have a comment, I'm sure our president will allow the comments to continue then as well. So general discussion? Seeing none. Public comment? Seeing none. Remarks by Alderman? And I thank you all. Clerk, do you have a motion?
I do, Mr. Chair. I would move to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn. All those by roll call, please.
I actually can't make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yeah, right, too.
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, Alderman
I'll make the
Wiltshire,
motion.
by roll call.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderman Karen.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderman Wiltshire.
Yes.
6 yeas, that motion carries.
Okay, the time is now 9:30. Without objection, Madam President, perhaps maybe 5-minute break for some of the members, a little bit of a stretch, and reconvene at 9:35.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, 9:35.